You sold my land while I was deployed. This ends now. The HOA had full authority, soldier. Read the rules.
I stepped off that plane at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and man, all I could taste was the recycled air and the lingering dust of somewhere I'd spent too long. But all I could think about was the smell of pine and fresh-cut grass back home. You know, just simple stuff. Grilling a steak on the deck I built myself, sinking into that oversized, ratty armchair, watching the sun drop over the Cascades from my backyard. 9 months, 40 weeks of counting down, and I was finally done with my deployment, ready for nothing more complicated than a quiet Tuesday night. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for the moment you pull your beat-up old truck into your own neighborhood, the one you spend a down payment the size of a small country's GDP on, and realize something is fundamentally, physically wrong. I drove past the welcome sign for the preserve at Copper Creek, still looking all polished and pretentious, and when I turned onto my cul-de-sac, my stomach just dropped out like a stone because my land, the 50 feet of private, pristine backyard buffer I used specifically for privacy, it was just gone. The fence line had been yanked back by nearly 40 feet, shoved right up almost to my deck stairs, and in place of my shade trees and fire pit, there was this ridiculous, half-finished construction zone, plastic orange fencing, fresh dirt mounds, and this tacky little laminated sign that read, "Future home of the Copper Creek Canine Agility Park. Phase 1 expansion." A dog park. They stole a massive chunk of my property to build a glorified puppy playground. I just stood there, jaw slack, staring at the sheer audacity of it all, when I heard the voice that could curdle milk from 50 yards away. "Jake Miller, is that really you? Oh, you're back already." It was Eleanor Vance, president of the HOA, mid-50s, sharp blonde bob, and that air of absolute, unearned authority that clung to her like cheap perfume. She was already marching down the sidewalk in a perfectly pressed white linen suit, like she was holding court in Versailles or something. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to just start digging a defensive trench right there in the newly stolen dirt. "Eleanor, you need to tell me why that entire parcel of my land has been converted into a community obstacle course for poodles," I said, and my voice was low, quieter than I meant it to be, which ironically made it sound even more dangerous. She tilted her head, giving me that condescending, pitying look she reserved for anyone who dared question her royal decree. "Oh, that parcel, darling? Well, technically, it was always designated as a community gray zone, a slight oversight in the original subdivision map, and frankly, Jake, you weren't using it, were you? We held a very civilized board vote, perfectly legal, to repurpose it for the benefit of the community's beloved four-legged residents, specifically the Duke." She gestured toward a tiny, perfectly groomed standard poodle tied to a decorative post nearby, who was staring at me with the same entitled expression as his owner. He needs space for his championship agility training, and that area was simply ideal for Phase 1. She paused for dramatic effect, then hit me with a knockout blow. "The HOA purchased the parcel from the community trust for $1, Jake. $1. It's all settled. You know how it is with property law these days. Use it or lose it, and frankly, you were gone a very long time." The nerve, the sheer, breathtaking, entitled nerve of this woman. "I have a deed, Eleanor, a legally recorded county deed that outlines my property line to the inch. I was serving my country, not abandoning a broken washing machine on the curb." I snapped, and I saw a flicker of something, maybe anger, maybe worry, behind her perfectly applied eyeshadow. "Well, you know, we always encourage our servicemen and women to support their local community, and this is truly for the good of all property values," she chirped, dismissing me with a wave of her hand and turning on her heel before I could even reply. "Welcome home, Jake. Try not to track too much dirt from overseas into the neighborhood, won't you?" I didn't yell. I didn't send an angry email. I just stood there, watching her pink manicured fingers smooth the lapel of her linen suit. And in that moment, I wasn't just mad, I was calculating. Eleanor Vance had just poked a soldier who had nothing left to lose, and she had no idea how precisely I was about to dismantle her entire little kingdom. I drove straight downtown, still in the travel clothes, found my old buddy Leo Reyes. We served together, he's a shark now, specializes in corporate law with an attitude. and I dumped a literal stack of documents on his polished mahogany desk. Leo owes me a big one, a life debt kind of favor. And when he saw the picture of my backyard transformed into a dog park, and then the fraudulent boundary amendment document, his jaw got tight. It took him just 2 hours to confirm the fraud. They hadn't just moved the fence. They had filed a bogus legal instrument, invoking some rarely used clause about eminent domain for community benefit, and attached an affidavit that allegedly signed away the property. The signature. God, it looked like I had signed it with a broken crayon taped to my elbow. And the notary? It was stamped and signed by a Dana Vance, listed in Palm Beach, Florida, Eleanor's sister, who, conveniently, didn't hold an active notary license in our state, or in Florida, for that matter, having lost it years ago for unspecified ethical lapses. This isn't just a property dispute, Jake, Leo said, leaning back, the fluorescent light glinting off his glasses. This is wire fraud, forgery, filing false instruments, and corporate malfeasance. She didn't just steal your land. She tried to sell the very idea of your private ownership for $1. We don't just sue for the land back. We sue to seize the HOA's corporate charter as a fraudulently operated entity. That was the moment. The plan was set. No more talking to Eleanor. No threats. No petty warfare. I installed a couple of high-definition security cameras on the rear of my house, pointed straight at the developing canine agility park. I documented everything. The sound of every shovel, every bag of cement, every meeting where they allocated funds for their petty little pet project. Eleanor thought she had won a quick, cheap victory while the soldier was away, but I was about to turn her cul-de-sac into a legal war zone. Leo filed the suit 2 weeks later. He didn't serve Eleanor immediately. He timed it to hit the court docket right before their biggest annual meeting. The judge assigned to the case, Judge Thompson, was a renowned former federal prosecutor, the kind of guy who didn't tolerate nonsense or procedural shortcuts. This was going to be better than I hoped. The preliminary hearing was a masterclass in controlled destruction. Eleanor walked in, radiating confidence, wearing a silk scarf and carrying a stack of color-coded binders, not even bothering to bring a lawyer because, as she probably saw it, what was there to argue? Just her and her dim-witted vice president, Gary, the kind of guy who permanently looked like he was about to apologize for existing, sitting at the defense table. Judge Thompson was brief, direct, a tall man with a severe, silver crew cut. Miss Vance, the plaintiff alleges you filed forged documents to seize his land for a community project while he was deployed. Is this accurate? Eleanor stood, not looking at the judge, but right at me, a tight little smile plastered on her face. Your Honor, this is simply a misunderstanding spurred by Mr. Miller's overdramatic return. That parcel was deemed a community improvement zone. We were merely cleaning up old, ambiguous zoning, enhancing the neighborhood. Our job, really. Leo didn't even stand up all the way. He just addressed the judge while holding up the Dana Vance affidavit. Your Honor, Exhibit C details the forged notary certification. Exhibit D is the comparison of Mr. Miller's actual signature versus the one used on this document, which, as you can see, requires a stretch of the imagination typically reserved for children's fairy tales. We also move to compel the immediate release of all HOA financial records, meeting minutes, and communications concerning Project Canine Agility for the last 12 months. Judge Thompson didn't hesitate. He looked at Eleanor like she was a bug that had crawled onto his lunch. Miss Vance, your job is to enforce rules, not commit real estate fraud. Motion to compel is granted. All HOA assets and ongoing land development projects are hereby frozen by court order, pending full review. You are also instructed to retain legal counsel immediately. Eleanor's face went white. She sputtered. You can't. The dog park is scheduled for the grand opening next month. The deposits have been paid. The judge's voice was pure ice. You seem to misunderstand the concept of a court order, Miss Vance. You will cease all activity on that land, effective immediately. Should you violate this order, you will face charges of contempt. She didn't storm out right away, but she turned her glare back to me, pure venom. You did this, Jake. You think you're so righteous? You'll regret crossing the board. I think, I murmured, loud enough only for her to hear. I think you just brought a knife to a nuclear war, Eleanor. Outside, Leo was practically vibrating. That's Act 2, buddy. Now the fun begins. He checked his phone. We already got a contact. Mrs. Albright, the HOA secretary. She's coming forward with internal emails. Turns out the community enhancement project is a lot dirtier than just a dog park. What Mrs. Albright revealed blew the case wide open. It turned out Eleanor wasn't just embezzling basic HOA dues. She was running a massive, sophisticated short-term rental (STR) operation, Airbnb and VRBO, using multiple vacant properties in the neighborhood, all of which were strictly forbidden by the HOA bylaws. She used the shell company she'd funneled the dog park funds into, Copper Creek Property Management, to manage the bookings, collect the cash, and launder the rental income, keeping the HOA books pristine while siphoning hundreds of thousands into offshore accounts. The dog park? It was just a convenient distraction and a way to justify moving my property line to create a private access road to one of her illegal rental units that backed onto my lot. 2 mornings after the injunction, I saw a dump truck pull up to the dog park site. Ignoring the court order, Eleanor was personally supervising 2 guys who were rapidly dumping gravel along the intended path. She looked right at my camera and actually waved, a smug, contemptuous gesture. I didn't wait. I emailed the time-stamped video to Leo, and he filed the contempt of court motion faster than I could brew a cup of coffee. Judge Thompson reacted instantly. He issued a bench warrant for a site inspection and ordered the state attorney's office to immediately take custody of all physical HOA records. Within hours, Eleanor's little gravel path was surrounded by yellow tape. The state investigators found irregularities in 8 other properties, all involving boundary corrections for owners who traveled or were elderly. They confirmed the STR operation and the use of the shell company to process payments across state lines, the magic phrase that brought the big dogs into the fight: wire fraud, crossing state lines. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office took over the criminal investigation. This wasn't local municipal law anymore. This was federal territory. Leo filed the final, decisive motion, placing the HOA into permanent receivership and dissolving the corporate entity entirely due to systematic and malicious fraud. It was granted immediately. Eleanor Vance and her cronies were officially stripped of all authority. The community meeting was held in the town civic hall, not the small, stuffy clubhouse. It was packed, standing room only. When the court-appointed administrator read the findings, the room went quiet. The HOA's property acquisition from Lot 14, owned by Mr. Jake Miller, was fraudulent and is immediately nullified. All land will be restored. Then the hammer fell. Due to ongoing federal criminal investigations into racketeering, embezzlement, and systematic data theft committed by the former board, the East Ridge Heights HOA is hereby dissolved. All authority reverts to the town council until a new, voluntary association can be established. Eleanor, who had somehow sneaked in, rose from the back row, face scarlet. This is ridiculous. This man is an anarchist. He's trying to destroy everything we built. Old Mr. Henderson, whose fence had been moved to accommodate Eleanor's illegal Airbnb parking, shouted back, "What you built was a prison, Eleanor, and you were collecting the rent." The applause was deafening, a wave of collective relief washing over the room. Eleanor fled, her heels clicking a desperate retreat on the polished floor. That evening, I walked the length of my restored property line. County markers, bright orange PVC, were stuck in the ground, marking the true boundary. I stopped near the back fence where the grass looked thin and disturbed, almost like someone had buried something. I grabbed a shovel. It didn't take much digging before I hit wood. Inside a rotting, waterproof box was Eleanor's secret ledger. Not digital, not filed, but a physical, handwritten spiral notebook. She had logged every single crime: names of targeted homeowners, the code names for the Airbnb accounts, the exact dollar amount siphoned, and a chilling line about my deployment. Miller, military, out for 9+ months. Prime target for access road. I drove that book straight to Leo. "This isn't just evidence, Jake," Leo whispered, flipping through the meticulous, sociopathic handwriting. "This is a confession." She wrote it all down like she thought she was completely untouchable. With the physical ledger and Gary's cooperation, who flipped for immunity, coughing up the passwords to Eleanor's offshore email server, the prosecution had everything. The final indictment dropped 3 weeks later, 32 counts, including wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft for selling homeowner contact lists, and racketeering. Her entire empire, the dog park, the HOA, the Airbnb scheme, it was all just a veneer for systematic, organized crime. The day of the sentencing was cold and quiet. I was asked to read a victim impact statement, and I agreed, not for me, but for Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Albright, and all the people who couldn't fight back. Eleanor looked small and gray in a mandatory pantsuit, her blonde bob now limp and dull. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. I stepped up to the microphone. Your Honor, this isn't about 50 feet of grass. It's about trust. Eleanor Vance didn't just steal land and money. She weaponized the covenant of community. She turned neighbors into marks, a friendly association into a private racket, and she did it all with a smile and a clipboard. She treated the law like an inconvenience and our homes like her personal piggy bank. I fought overseas for the idea of home, and I shouldn't have had to come back and fight this small, petty tyranny in my own backyard, but we did. And we won, not with threats, but with patience, law, and truth. Judge Thompson didn't spend much time deliberating. He cited her systematic abuse of power, the targeting of the vulnerable, and the crossing of state lines with the STR and data fraud. He sentenced Eleanor Vance to 22 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. She was denied bail, they having found a burner phone and a set of plane tickets to the Cayman Islands dated 3 days after the Canine Agility Project began. The preserve at Copper Creek HOA was dissolved permanently. It was replaced by the Copper Creek Neighbors Trust, a voluntary, non-enforcement association. Dues became suggested donations. Meetings became potlucks. I worked with Leo and Mrs. Albright to draft the new community charter. No board member could serve more than one term without a full community revote, and no fines could be levied without an independent, court-approved mediator. Every financial report, all of them, had to be posted publicly. My backyard was restored, the soil aerated, the fence put back where it belonged. I left one thing, though, right near the corner of the new fence line, a small, polished brass plaque, mostly obscured by the ferns. It wasn't visible from the street, just a quiet monument to the fight. It simply read, "This land was stolen. It was taken back. Your home is your home, and no one, no HOA president, no self-appointed emperor, has the right to take it from you." I look out now, months later, and the neighborhood feels different, you know? Not fancy, not reformed by some corporate committee, just quieter, freer, like the air has been cleaned out after a storm. Eleanor's house sold at auction. A young family moved in, painted the door a bright, hopeful shade of teal. They haven't mentioned HOAs once. But it makes you think, right? We won, we got justice, and she's where she belongs. But it took a federal indictment and a deployment's worth of focus to win back what should have been sacred ground. So here's the thing I need to know from you. Was dissolving the HOA completely and replacing it with a voluntary association the right answer? Or did we just trade one potential problem for another? Will a community without centralized enforcement authority eventually fall apart? Or is self-governance always the answer to corruption? What's the line between community rule and outright tyranny? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I want to hear your absolute, unfiltered opinions on HOA power, justice, and whether we should have just let the Duke have his agility course.